Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. A lot of you have been asking me about the news that Marvel is going to reboot the entire MCU with Avengers 6 Secret Wars, and it's true. It won't be exactly what people are expecting from a traditional reboot, but we'll explain what's going on and how everything's going to change going forward.
I also think that Marvel is on this journey now of they're trying a bunch of other stuff, and I'm excited for them to see how all that goes, and it's hard to project.
But you've probably seen the MCU reboot news or heard people talking about it. It's not a huge surprise, and it had to happen eventually. As much as I would love to see all the actors play their characters for like 50 years or do like 20 more Iron Man movies with Robert Downey Jr., there was no way that the movies in real life could work like the comic books do.
How many more of these?
Like, the comic book characters don't age the same way, they don't get increasing salaries with every movie, so eventually it just doesn't become completely impractical. What Kevin Feige and Marvel's loose plan is right now, and I say loose plan because they're known to change things on the fly. David Harbour, who plays Red Guardian, he's coming back in Thunderbolts, said that when they were filming the Black Widow movie, Marvel completely changed the third act of the movie, like the plot, everything that happened while they were actually filming it. Originally, it was a totally different movie. That's why you've been seeing all these deleted scenes from all these separate movies. You've been hearing all these stories about alternate storylines from all the Marvel movies. And they do that for every single movie. One of the exceptions, though, is like James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Now, he changes things, but he usually goes into movies with a clearer idea for what the script is going to be at the beginning, middle, and end of the movie. Most of the other Marvel movies get a completely new script by the time the movie is done. This is one of the reasons why you saw the visual effects artists at Marvel form a union this year after all the reports that they were being treated worse, and it's because Marvel changes their movies so much while they're in the middle of shooting them. It means the visual effects artists basically have to go without sleep for a year or more if it's an Avengers movie, just because those are so much bigger than regular Marvel movies. Right now, Kevin Feige is using Avengers 6 Secret Wars to pull a soft reboot, and I say soft reboot, on the entire MCU, and it's going to be based on the ending from the more recent comic book Secret Wars. A lot of people have been expecting them to do this, so it won't be quite as big a surprise. During that storyline, God Emperor Doom took the power of the Beyonders, who had started destroying the multiverse by causing incursions. Sounds familiar to what's happening in the MCU right now. After he and Doctor Strange managed to defeat them, he combines the remnants of the last remaining universes together to form a single planet and save as many survivors from the multiverse as possible, creating what they call Battle World, one world for the entire multiverse. As you would expect, he goes full Doctor Doom and rules over it like a god, getting everyone to worship him. Eventually, the surviving heroes learn what's happened. In order to fix the multiverse, they have to defeat him, and once they do, Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four use Franklin Richards' unique powers to recreate the entire multiverse, one universe at a time. They mentioned Franklin Richards during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness like his son, quote-unquote. The whole idea is that Franklin Richards is one of the most powerful or overpowered characters in Marvel. He has the ability to create entire universes in his mind. Just to give you an idea of how OP he is, Galactus eventually becomes the herald of Franklin Richards. But Marvel used this time in the comics as a jumping off point for all their titles, changing storylines, characters, restarting characters, combining characters from different universes, basically the all new, all different era. And that's kind of what Marvel Studios is doing with the MCU. Just to give you an idea, in the comics, that's when Miles Morales came to the 616 universe with the main version of Peter Parker's Spider-Man. They rebooted Iron Man. Doctor Doom briefly became a version of Iron Man in the infamous Doctor Doom. A new Avengers team formed with Miles Morales on it, Falcon, Captain America, a bunch of other characters. The 8th Cosmos was born, like the living embodiment of the multiverse, all reality. The original comics, going back to like the 1960s and earlier in real life, was when most of these characters were created. They'd all been living in the 7th version of the multiverse, the 7th Cosmos. So Kevin Feige and Marvel are essentially doing something similar, where Avengers 5 Kang Dynasty will be like the new Avengers versus the Council of Kangs. They tease that in the Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania post-credit scene. The whole idea is that the new Avengers are meant to lose that fight because the Kangs will be too powerful, like they'll get their asses handed to them, but a more powerful Beyonder variant of Kang or some kind of Beyonder type of character is supposed to return and destroy the Council of Kangs and collapse the multiverse the rest of the way. They'll be left with a version of Battleworld in a movie version of Avengers 6 Secret Wars. That's kind of what they're getting to with the second version of the Kang Multiverse War and all this talk that Loki is doing in the Loki Season 2 trailer. The movie version of Secret Wars is supposed to be a combination of the original 1980s Secret Wars and the more modern version, with some changes obviously to account for all the different characters and things that they want to change in real life. Most of the characters who survive the destruction of the multiverse in Avengers 5 will be like the legacy actors from the Fox Marvel movies, the X-Men movies like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, so on. In Doctor Strange, we'll have to assemble a multiverse team of Avengers to defeat whoever this Beyonder or Kang variant winds up being. That's why you probably heard about Andrew Garfield coming back during Secret Wars, Hugh Jackman coming back, Patrick Stewart coming back as a version of Professor X, like all of these legacy actors coming back for a final swan song in a big Avengers crossover movie. That's what we mean when we say having a big swan song going out for all these legacy Fox Marvel characters. And they defeat that Beyonder, then they remake the multiverse in a similar way from the comic book Secret Wars. But here's where the soft reboot comes in. The loose plan right now is that they recreate the main Marvel universe like the 616 universe, but it'll be a little bit different from before, and it'll be truer to the comic book 616 universe, the way that it looked with all the different characters coexisting the whole time on the same Earth. The changes they make will explain that the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, mutant characters, all the Marvel characters have always existed on the same universe, Earth, except for some space-based characters, obviously. So the reason he's doing this should be obvious. Kevin Feige up to this point hasn't had access to all of Marvel's characters. For years, going back to the first Avengers movie, Marvel Phase 1, Kevin Feige had always been trying to get all these characters to cross over movies, but for legal reasons, copyright, he just couldn't get Sony and Fox to agree to do that. Probably the best example of that is this deleted Iron Man post-credit scene where Nick Fury references Spider-Man and the X-Men crossing over with that first Avengers movie.
As if gamma accidents, radioactive bug bites, and assorted mutants weren't enough. I have to deal with a spoiled brat who doesn't play well with others and wants to keep all his toys to himself. Who the hell are you? Nick Fury.
So the idea is that Kevin Feige had never been able to pull off all those crossovers for a number of different reasons. It was just too difficult, too much bureaucracy. But now Marvel has all their characters back. There's no more bureaucracy that Kevin Feige has to deal with anymore. He can do whatever he wants with all the characters. Anybody can cross over with anybody. Now the easiest way to reconcile that Eternals question, it all goes back to that. Why weren't the Eternals in Avengers Endgame? How have all these characters from all these different lines like Fantastic Four, X-Men, Avengers characters who are supposed to be so important have always been there, but we're just learning that some of them exist 10 or 15 years later, and they were never around for the major Avengers battles before. You do a soft reboot and just play things like they always have been here and restart a lot of things, and it gives Marvel the opportunity to recast characters if they want as well, like just retune their backstories however they need to. Now, just to be clear, they're not recasting everyone, only some of the characters, and in the comic book version of this Secret Wars reboot, some of the characters did remember the previous version of the universe and everything that came before. In the comics, it was Black Panther, but in real life, Chadwick Boseman passed away. May he rest in peace. So my early theory right now is that Reed Richards and at least some of the other characters will remember everything from before. That explains how they introduce a new version of the MCU Fantastic Four the next couple of years and release their movie by 2025, and those actors still play the characters after the soft reboot. Same with characters like Shang-Chi, some of the other brand new characters from the Multiverse Saga, Phase 4, 5, and 6. Some characters they'll introduce in the next couple of years before Secret Wars. They're not going to immediately recast those people. And for the legacy characters like the big guys, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, Chris Evans' Captain America, they'll just say that the original sacred timeline that they come from, the Infinity Saga timeline, which they clarified in Loki, like that original Infinity Saga takes place in the sacred timeline before the timeline rebooted. They'll say that they still exist in a separate universe so that those actors can always come back if they want to, like 10 or 20 years, like never say never. People can always come back. They did the same thing with the Spider-Man character. They rebooted Spider-Man so many times, it's just a short time span, but then they found a way to logically bring those legacy actors back, Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire. So they'll do the same thing in the future with other characters, just saying that they're from other universes. So just to be clear, Kevin Feige isn't totally getting rid of everyone or just like wiping the slate clean and saying that these previous Marvel movies never happened or anything like that. He's just recreating the main Marvel universe so that it looks a little bit more like the truer 616 Marvel universe with all their characters together so that everything just makes a little more sense with the characters and stories going forward, and so that newer viewers who are just starting with the Marvel movies and shows don't have to watch like 50 movies just to understand what's going on in the next movie, which a lot of people have started to complain about more and more.
I believe, maybe I'm optimistic. I understand at Marvel they've got Avengers, they've got a lot of big things going on, but at some point, I just find it almost impossible to believe there's not a way to bring Iron Man, all the Avengers characters, Wolverine, the X-Men characters, Spider-Man, and somehow get them in together.
But before they do that, he wants to have one final hurrah with all the legacy actors, mostly Fox Marvel characters, but you get the idea. Everybody comes back, they have a giant party, giant crossover going out, and then he recreates everything, retunes things so that everything just makes more sense going forward. Here's the billion-dollar question though, let me know in the comments. If Marvel does introduce new versions of pre-existing main characters who either have totally retired, passed away, don't want to come back, who do you want them to recast? The easiest picks are all the core X-Men characters just because none of them have been introduced in the main MCU universe yet or with new versions. Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, for example, who's coming back in Deadpool 3, is like a completely separate universe version of the character. In fact, Ryan Reynolds is one of the only main mutant-based characters from the Fox Marvel movies who will probably still remember his original X-Men universe in the new version of this timeline. So the whole idea is that Kevin Feige is planning the cosmic version of fixing the multiverse by turning it off and turning it back on again. Unplug it and plug it back in, basically. Completely answers the question of how do new viewers in like the next 10 years get into Marvel movies without having to know all the canon that pre-exists in the Infinity Saga.